Back when I was a kid in Northern Ireland, we were able to watch a story program on children's television called Jack and Ori. Anybody heard of it? Yeah, well, Adam would have done, of course. But anyway, Jack and Ori is just simply a storytelling program. And it actually became something so popular that stars, A-listers, would actually read the stories. And that was all pretty cool. But anyway, there was a trademark beginning to all of it. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. There's a man in a boat, pushed out a little way from the shore, and a crowd standing on the beach in the sun. And he tells them a story about a farmer. Not a lesson, a story. That was his way, and that's why I introduced the sermon like that. Jesus hands you and me something ordinary. A field, a coin, a lost sheep, and lets it turn in your hand until you find yourself in it. So listen the way you would to a story and not to an exam. You won't be examined on this on the way out, and nor will I be asking you questions during this sermon either. Especially for those in the back row. If you don't know, I always start the questions at the back moving forward because it's just basically it's more fun. Anyway, so the farmer goes out to sow. Now, here is a thing that a first century crowd knew in their bones, and I didn't know until a couple of days ago. And it was after our Wednesday Bible study, actually, and that we've been told in that farmers then sowed the seed first and then plowed it in, which is completely different to how I was brought up. So it's messed with my head completely. And so my own experience is back-breaking work of before you can plow the fields, you've got to lift the stones that seem to magically turn up every year. And you have to lift them and put them into what's called a link box, which is basically a big thing. You just keep tossing these huge boulders in before you can plow the land. And then you plow the land, and then you scarify it, and then you sow the seed. But not here. Here, you threw the seed like that. And my picture on the front cover of the service bulletin is trying to convey that message with the casting of the seed. Imagine an ark, they're just going along. They had no AirPods or iPhone or anything like that to listen to any music or anything like that, so they're having to hum to themselves or whatever else they did to occupy themselves. And so the farmer goes out to sow and plows in the seed afterwards. You walked the field and you flung it wide by the handful before the ground was ever turned. So what looks to us like carelessness, and for my father would be unthinkable, it's seed on the path, seed on the rocks, was simply how it was done in those days. The sowing came first, the sorting came later. So picture that hand, if you will, on the front cover, opening and throwing, seed arcing out over ground. The farmer has not inspected and has not even approved. And wherever you are hearing this, whether it is in the church or online, live or later on, some days after the fact, I want you to see that the same handful is being thrown out towards you. You are already in the field. Now, most of us, when we hear that, we all do the same thing. We start taking the test. Which soil am I? Am I the path, the rocks, the thorns, or even, dare I hope for, the good ground? Anybody do that? What am I? That whole what am I business. And that is not a foolish question. Jesus himself, when he explains the story, walks through the 4 soils one by one. But if you start there, you will miss the first thing he shows you. And the first thing is not the soil. It is the sower. It is the sheer or reckless generosity of a hand that throws good seed everywhere first, before a single question is asked about the ground. Hold on to that, because that's actually really important, because it changes everything about how to look at your own life. So let us be honest first, though, by looking at the ground, because that is also the story. Jesus said the seed gets taken, it gets scorched, it gets choked. And notice what does the choking. Not some dramatic wickedness. Thorns. And he names them himself. The worries of this life. The pull of wealth. Some of you might laugh at that. Ordinary things. The things that crowd. Now, for most of us, it is not one great sin that strangles the word. It is simply the crowding out. It is reaching for the phone in the small silences before the quiet can turn into anything. Any of you guilty of that? You know, the minute you've got some sort of silence, so the minute you've got a silence, you're straight onto the phone. I have a certain other half who's addicted to the screen, and so when he wakes up in the middle of the night, what does he do? He goes to his phone, and then he complains that he can't sleep. You can imagine the tit for tat on that one. And that's how it goes. So anyway, back to this. I felt this one. So the small silences, we turn, before the quiet can even settle in, we're straight onto our phones. We are filling our minds. It is the same worry running on its loop. The one about your children, or your health, or the money that does not stretch to the end of the month. It is going back again to the thing that has never once fed you. Have you ever sort of like stopped your doom scrolling and thought, what was that even about? Why did I waste that time? Or is that just me? Anybody else going to admit to that? Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. I think I've got a renter mob now. That's good. And his name's Adam. Okay. So none of these things are evil. And actually, that's partly the issue. Because that's what makes them dangerous. It is just enough all day, every day, to keep the seed from the light. And Jesus calls that a thorn. So that's what I'm trying to get to here. And here I want to say something carefully. For some of you this week, the ground is not merely busy. It is being shelled. There are people hearing this whose family and friends are living in danger, where the shelling is close, or where they're waiting in camps on the far side of a border, hoping for a safe country to open its door, enduring now a hardship most of this room will never be asked to carry. And for others of you, the ground is simply tired and crowded and ordinary. Either way, hear this. The seed still lands in real lives. It always has. It is thrown into the field as it actually is. Not the field you wish you could show, but the reality of it. You can look without fear because the seed was thrown before you were ever ready. I'm going to repeat that. You can look without fear because the seed was thrown before you were ever ready, or indeed could do anything about it. And so what I want to do is ask the question that undoes this whole test. Remember at the beginning I sort of said about, am I the rocky ground? Am I this, what am I here? Okay, well, how did the good soil ever get to be good? Deep, isn't it? Okay, how did the good soil ever get to be good? Because no field has ever reached down and pulled its own thorns out. No patch of earth cleared itself and made itself ready. I wish when I was a kid. And that is exactly the most boring job ever. I really hated it. Okay, and that is exactly the point. The Apostle Paul presses in a real letter written to a real and divided church in Rome, to people who felt the same split down the middle of themselves that you feel in yourself. There is now, he says, no condemnation. The law could not make you good. Willpower could not clear the ground. But the Spirit of God, Paul says, gives life, even to mortal bodies like ours, sets the mind free, makes the dead ground live. That's pretty exciting, isn't it? Which means the power in you to take a word and keep it, whatever softness there is in you, whatever readiness you did not make that. It was given to you. It's exciting, isn't it? You still with me? Has this got overly intellectual? I'm trying to keep to the script because otherwise I'm going to run over time. It's the truth of it, because I am too excited about this subject. And it was given. But once it was given, it is yours to keep, yours to guard, yours to live. The very ears that can hear this are on loan. There is a breath of God woven through the cold clay of our lives. And it is God's doing, not our achievement. And so for anyone here for whom simply becoming who you are made to be has felt costly or contested or slow, hear it plainly. What is alive in you that can love and can receive love is God's own planting in your life, not something you had to build to earn your place in the field. I may repeat that because I just think I want you to hear this. So for any of you for whom simply becoming who you are made to be has felt costly or contested or slow, hear this plainly. What is alive in you that can love and can receive love is God's own planting in your life, not something you had to build to earn your place in the field. And if that gives you an internal, I'm glad. And I have to be honest with you, because I have preached the other thing in reality. I grew up on the edge of farming. My father's farm ran on efficiency. I think you know that by now. You did not fling seed onto rock, most certainly not. You did not waste it on the path. Every handful was measured because waste was money. And money was hard. And that was good farming. And it was in my bones. Do not waste anything. And is this productive, i.e., is this making money? Leisure was not a big thing in my household. There's no money in that, so it would often be the refrain. And so it has sometimes landed in my own preaching, because I have looked at things through that westernized farming frame, when actually what I should have done is have taken more understanding of what was actually going on in first century farming. So I acknowledge that. And this is the thing I love. Because as you continue with stuff, you learn new stuff, and it changes how you approach things. So I don't see that as a failure. I see that as just a sign of growing and developing. And I hope you will too, that things that you believed 5 years ago, you won't believe today. And things you believed 30 years ago is probably unrecognizable to you today. I hope so anyway. Anyway, where did I get to? I've gone off. You see, I've already gone off. So done that bit. And so, we've done the efficient farming and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't need to talk to my dad and how scary that was. It was only in the last few days that I actually saw that, as I mentioned at the very beginning. My father simply would find this incomprehensible, to waste seed on unplowed land. That land has not been prepared. He would just go mental. I just can see it. He just would. If anybody ever did that, he would be livid for 5 years. It's that kind of vibe that he would have given. So you don't throw things everywhere. And that's the point in this parable. It is thrown everywhere, and it's thrown liberally. It's outrageous. Now, on the front cover of the service bulletin, because I'll forget about this, I have given you a fantastic quote by Walter Brueggemann, 2 quotes actually, that I've smashed together. And I would love you to rip off the front page of this service bulletin and take it home with you. Because if you sit with those words every day this week, I think you will find that transformative. So I don't mind you ripping up the service bulletins to take what you need home. Announcements, front cover, all those things. But I do try and find something on the front cover that is to carry this message through the week. So the idea is that the quotes that I use are designed for you to take away for the week ahead more than anything else. And that reckless generosity comes right through Walter Brueggemann's. Walter Brueggemann died recently, but he is like one of the greatest recent scholars, particularly in the Old Testament. And he's fantastic in terms of understanding. So Walter Brueggemann is one of my go-tos if you want to understand some of my theological positions on the Old Testament. Anyway, I digress again. I'm so tempted to make fun of that, but there's no need. And so the scandal at the heart of all of this is this radical generosity of the sower. That is the first thing we encounter, is that radical generosity of throwing it everywhere with gay abandon. And I almost mean that literally. So the sower does not wait for good ground to emerge. He is already out there sowing seed wherever. Walking the whole ruined acre, throwing seed on the path and the rocks and the choked out corners, all of it, long before any of us were thought worth the effort. And these are among the oldest stories our faith remembers, and they never pretend otherwise. Think of Jacob. We haven't time to go into this. I mean, if you want to talk about this in the after service conversation afterwards, red is a key thing to be aware of from the Old Testament thing. So him coming out of red stew, all this sort of stuff is actually relevant. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there I can't even go into right now. And so this older stuff, what I'm going to say is that Jacob was grasping, and that nobody in the first reading we had comes out of this good. If you want to know about dysfunctionality in your family, read this, okay? We have total dysfunctionality. We have Isaac favoring the eldest and his wife favoring the youngest, and they then have this selling of a birthright, and honestly, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. This is just the beginning of a nightmare that continues for a little while. So if you ever worry about does your family fit in the scriptures, the answer is almost certainly yes, especially if it's messed up. More, if you have a nice, neat family, that's where you'll struggle more than actually if you have a dysfunctional family. So I take a lot of pleasure in that. Okay, so back to Jacob. So in Genesis, grasping his brother's heel, this is written as a kind of a, whether it was literal or not, that grasping nature, that grasping for the heel is certainly a useful metaphor. Buying a birthright off a man, his brother, who frankly has just trivialized it by saying, I will give that up for red stew. And I sit with this thinking that he will have gone past a whole bunch of tents, because there was a lot of people in this encampment, who would have been cooking. They just always would have been. They always had something on the go, because that's just what you do. But no, he comes into his family's tent and then says, hey, yeah, I'll give up my birthright for some of that red stew. And it's not even put like that. It's called red stuff. Did you notice that? It was said, that red stuff. I'll sell give me some of that red stuff. And it's like, you're giving this up for red stuff? Jolly good. Okay. So, and then Jacob doesn't come out this well either, because he's just a grasping, little conniving, whatever. So, none of them come out of this well, just so you know. So we're not looking for heroes in the first reading at all. But what we see instead is blessing landing on undeserving land, do we not? That's what I think we see there. And that's how God sows. And what comes up out of that failing ground is not a modest return. We're back now to the illustration that Jesus has. Now, in normal farming world, a good year might have yielded you back fivefold. Maybe 10 if the season was really kind. But Jesus says 30, 60, 100. So in other words, we've got this radical waste of seed and this overabundant harvest. Do you get it? Both sides are extreme. This is like illustrative of like you've sown this wastefully and yet you've got record-breaking harvest. That's what's coming out of this. So there's something there in God's economy that you can sow radically and generously and all the rest of it, and we can have a record-breaking harvest that exceeds anybody's normal expectations. There's something here about the fact that God takes small things and transforms them into amazing things. That's what the parables are often pointing to these days. Okay, an impossible harvest out of ground that by every reasonable measure should have grown nothing at all. And that is why you can look straight at your worst ground in your interior garden and not despair. I don't know if you look at yourself sometimes and go, oh, what a nightmare. Anybody do that? Yeah, it's quite natural. Well, this, I hope, is an encouragement. You don't have to stress out about that. The harvest never depended on your soil coming clean. It depends on a sower who throws good seed everywhere first. So that was never resting on you, getting the field right. It was resting on God. So it's what we do with receiving it is the issue. So hear it and let it take root this time. Wherever this finds you, whether it is in the church today, whether it's in the kitchen at home, or alone at the end of a hard day, the word outlasts the ground that it falls on. The hand that threw the seed is the same hand that brings the harvest up. The same hand. God always knew what your field was, and God threw it anyway. May we pray. Loving God, you know the ground we are. You have seen every thorn and every stone, and you have not withheld the seed. Turn our hearts so that our hearts may be good soil. Grow in us what we could never grow in ourselves, and bring up a harvest that we can hardly believe or imagine. Wherever this finds us, let the word take root now. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.